Thank you for tuning in to the Practical Preservation Podcast. Please take a moment to visit our website, practicalpreservationservices.com, for additional information and tips to help you restore your historical home. If you've not done so, please subscribe to us on iTunes, Stitcher, or SoundCloud, and also like us on Facebook. Welcome to the Practical Preservation Podcast, hosted by Danielle and Jonathan Kepperling. Kepperling Preservation Services is a family-owned business based in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, dedicated to the preservation of our built architectural history for today's use as well as future generations. Our weekly podcast provides you with expert advice specific to the unique needs of renovating a historic home, educating by sharing our From the Trenches preservation knowledge and our guests' expertise, balancing modern needs while maintaining the historical significance, character, and beauty of your period home.
Today on the Practical Preservation Podcast, we have Adam Zurn from Uncharted History with us. Thank you for joining us today, or Uncharted Lancaster, sorry.
No problem. Hey, Danielle, thanks for having me here today. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about your background.
Sure. The job that actually pays the bills is I'm a teacher here in Lancaster County at Lampeter-Strasburg High School, and this is going to be year 19 for me. So a lot of people always assume that I'm a history teacher, but I'm actually a technology education teacher, where a lot of the technology and stuff of Uncharted Lancaster kind of comes in with the 3D printing and the website design and all of those pieces there.
Okay, I could see how people would make the assumption that you were a history teacher, but you can find ways to direct your passions. So why did you choose this history as your topic with the different adventures that you have?
Well, just kind of the general, even though I'm not a history teacher, I've always had a lot of interest in history. My parents were both teachers, and, we would spend almost every summer road tripping around the United States. And I used to joke about visiting all these dead guys' houses that were, famous for one reason or another, things that are hard to appreciate, when you're 10 or 12 or 13 years old.
Right.
But, as I get older and I read things or I watch things, I'm like, oh, I've been to that guy's house, and so I think it was just sort of ingrained in me from an early age by my mother. But, and I've just grown up, I can sort of tell my origin story here, and unfortunately there's no superpowers involved. But, just grew up with movies like, Raiders of the Lost Ark and the Goonies and things like that. And, just those, these characters that get to go on these grand adventures and, finding the treasure and deciphering clues. And as I got older, kind of on the other side of, from being a child to being an adult, and thought it would be neat to be able to do something like that, or at least, maybe set something up where people could go on some kind of adventure. You don't get to fight any Nazis, but, maybe you'll find some treasure along the way. So I really probably have to give credit to my dogs. We have two now. We had one at the time, and you've got to walk a dog. A tired dog is a good dog.
Yeah.
And so we would just walk all over the place. And I often like to go places where I wouldn't necessarily have to use a leash, and just went past kind of these neat objects and neat things. And I remember just sort of asking about it, and at school and at work, and hey, do you know anything about this? And people kind of tell me just enough that I could start to look it up on my own. And for a while, someone had talked about, I walk in Shanks Ferry a lot or near it. And they're like, oh, have you seen the abandoned cemetery down there? And I was like, no. They're like, where is it? They're like, well, it's near the tracks, across the stream and up a hill. And I spent several months looking for it, and I finally tracked it down, and there's a big story involved with that. But I just thought that was a neat experience, and I thought other people might enjoy having an experience like that, where you're kind of looking for this lost thing, and
right.
maybe you're finding some treasure along the way. And from there, it started to, kind of formulate into these adventures you can go on with your family.
I think that's great. And I thought of two things while you were talking. First of all, I had noticed that you have on your website, the Goonies kit. And I was like, oh, I need to put that on my list for my husband, Jonathan, because my dad's family's from Oregon. They have a house on the Oregon coast. So every time we're there, he's like, we have to go to Astoria and see the
Yeah,
house.
Goonie House. Yeah.
So that makes him happy. So I will have to order that for him. But this is the second podcast that I've recorded. The first one isn't live yet. In the past week, where it's combining nature and history, and I think that that's an interesting. And I think it's important, and I think that the two movements, for lack of a better word, work well together, but they don't. There's not necessarily always an overlap. And I think that that's really important to get people out and especially now where everybody's trying to stay inside and stay away from other people, get people outside, but then also be able to learn about different historical things right in our backyard.
And sort of Uncharted Lancaster kind of has like two sides that I talk about. One is there's just sort of this history side, and
Mm-hmm.
and I often try and talk about maybe less common pieces of Lancaster history, like, oh, I didn't know that, or what is that? And but then sort of the other side is the, hey, as an incentive to maybe go and visit this place, like here's this adventure that's going to take you out there and do that. I didn't know my core audience would be families with, I would say, tweens and younger
Mm-hmm.
age group. I didn't know, because some of these hikes are 4 or more miles
Right.
long,
Yeah.
and I get emails all the time, and I get probably at least one a week that says, wow, my kid complains about walking to the mailbox to pick up the mail, and we just walked 4.5 miles, and then up and down hills and through streams, and no one complained once, and it was because we were looking for treasure. And like, even though it's a plastic trinket of some
Yeah.
kind, they're like, wow, thank you so much, that was amazing, we can't wait to do more. And once usually someone does one, they do all of them,
Right.
like within like a very short amount of time typically.
Yeah, that's fun, and that made me think too. Maybe it was last year. It was an earlier podcast. Clio is a app, but they do. It's like they do tours and different things. They mostly partner with historical societies.
Yeah, I think I've seen the app.
Yeah, and they have an augmented reality where
That's cool.
you can hold up like your phone to like what and see what the building used to look like, or see what the building that used to be there was. And when you said people do it in a short amount of time, made me think of like all the people that were out looking for Pokemon when Pokemon Go was so popular. It made me think of that. But similar idea where people just get really into it. So
Yeah, that's the neat, like things like Pokemon or with the VR is just like this. It's such a twist. Instead of just sitting at home and playing a video game, you're out and
Right.
about. And again, this is, you're using a screen typically to like, decipher the clues, and here's the map and all that. But again, you're out and about, and, getting people up and walking. And a lot of people have appreciated that, just this, and I felt like I was the only thing open, during March and April.
Yes.
During the height of the pandemic. I was, like, well, you can go out in the woods by yourself, I guess, and look for treasure. So, I mean, I think I had 48,000 web views.
Oh my goodness, that's great.
15, 20,000 more than I typically see.
Yeah.
So I was like, I guess I am the only thing open for business out there.
Yes. So tell me a little bit about Uncharted Lancaster.
Sure. So, I kind of came up with the idea. It's probably pushing like 2 years now, and just, thought it would be neat, and kind of created one adventure, and people liked it so much. I made a second, and people liked that so much, and I get a lot of questions. When's the next one going to be? And I'm like, I don't know. It's a lot of work. It's coming. It's coming. And so I lose track. I might have a dozen now on the website that are up and running. Like I've got 2 more with a partnership with Lancaster Conservancy that are for Water Week here. Like I think that's August 7th through the 15th.
Okay.
So we're pretty excited about that. And I think one of them we're going to try and keep running more or less indefinitely, or for at least longer than just the week there, the one at Climbers Run. So we're pretty excited about that. And again, kind of talked about getting getting off the couch and doing things.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how the Lancaster Conservancy and I got partnered up. We had a meeting, months and months ago to talk about some things, but they kind of liked what I was doing and maybe bringing in possibly like new and different people into their preserves. And that's their big project is, getting out into nature, and I was sort of reaching maybe a different group of people than they normally see. So, with all the problems we're having and the restrictions with COVID-19, they needed to do Water Week in some different ways. Normally they have big group events and tours, and a lot of that just isn't going to work. So, they have some virtual presentations where they would have kind of like what we're doing now here in Zoom, as opposed to the normal get together. And so they reached out to me about, could we partner on doing some kind of, self-guided adventure, which is, what mine are, to just, be able to still get people out there and doing stuff, but, meeting the restrictions that the virus is posing for us.
Yeah. And I enjoy, I've started following you on social media probably earlier this year, and I enjoy the side quests where it's like things that maybe you can't get to that really aren't like part of the official, but you still learn about the history of the buildings, like the one in
Peckway?
Was it the Peckway? Was it the one that's like the hotel?
The Peckway Hotel. Yeah, that was neat. So I like to be able to like send people, hey, go visit this place, go do this thing. But, of course we run into private property and things like that. Yeah. So I kind of created this like armchair explorers series where places that, you can't go for several reasons. And like, and that was kind of how that one got started. But it was just one of those, I'm so used to the internet, like you just Google something and the answer's right there in the top, and they bold it in yellow for you now. or even like, this is the sentence you're looking for. Like,
and I'm old enough to remember. Yeah, and I'm old enough to remember when we would have disagreements at the dinner table when I was in middle school. We would call the librarian at the Lancaster Library as a tiebreaker.
Exactly. Even now, like you Google it and it says, oh, watch this YouTube video, but you only need to watch like this 30-second clip and they have it highlighted. Yeah. And so, I'm pretty used to that, and I definitely predate the internet, but so I remember doing some research on the trolley system Lancaster used to have, and towards the back of the publication, there was this big full-page spread ad for the Peckway Inn, coming, soon, and the publication on that I think is 1910, and I was like, that's interesting, and so I Google it, and all that really came up was the ad, like just this this PDF.
Right.
And, I started doing some, that was kind of it. And I went and did things. And of course, COVID came along and I had a lot more time to do things than I might normally, because all my, extracurriculars got canceled.
Right.
But just started doing some research with, in the LNP archives and some other places. And, I discovered like, no, this wasn't just a thing on a piece of paper. Like they started building this massive hotel, and, and it's just, searching to one thing and a name, and, oh, it's on Hartman Hill. Where exactly is Hartman Hill? And then that's, a whole nother wave of searching and speaking about private property, I've kind of run into that as in the past in an issue before. So I have an app now that like tells me, exactly where I am and whose property I'm on, so I don't, wander off into private property. But I was able to use that because I had a pretty good idea where the building was. And then I was kind of able to cross-reference that with who was the property owner. And, I reached out to them I kind of took a stab. I'm like, well, there's, so many of these people in the area. Let's start at number one, and we'll start Facebook messaging them. And do you have giant foundations on your property? And if so, be opposed to me coming out and looking at them. But anyway, they were very nice, and the woman there like took me out and gave me a big tour of the grounds, and there they were, and I'm like, wow, this is just it's been like 100 years. And then I was able to, again, we talked a little about the VR. I'm not quite there yet, but I can do some 3D design. So using the drawing from the picture and then all the written descriptions of the building, I was able to like on a 1-to-1 scale design the building, in Google SketchUp, and, and then just, hey, here it is. And this is what it would look like. And then, doing some Photoshop stuff, put it on got some photos down there at the Peckway Marina and superimpose the building. Like this is what it would look like today. So yeah, it was a neat experience, neat getting out there and seeing that. But since people couldn't visit, try to document it as well as I could for people to kind of, virtually visit there via the web.
Well, and now that the history and all the research that you've done is there. So if somebody else is looking for it, it's available as information. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's important, because there's a lot of I've probably talked about it in every podcast that I've recorded since I started reading this book, but I'm reading a book called Northern Slavery, or Slavery in the North, something like that. And it's not actually, I thought it would be more of a history book, but it's not. He's actually a psychologist that talks about collective memory, and how once you don't have the things, like the places, or the objects that tie the history, it starts to get lost. And so I think that probably, except for those landowners, nobody really had bothered to go out and look and know what was there and what was going to be there. And now you've brought that back.
Lancaster Conservancy owns a property like adjacent to it, and I had first reached out to them. I was pretty sure it wasn't, just because I could look at the topography of the land. It was like, and it's a slope. But I was like, well, you can at least visit their property pretty easy. So I did start out with them, and they were like, no, and they put me in contact with one of their people who from the Peckway area, and she had, like, again, very limited knowledge on it, just because like this stuff is buried. But since then, I think it was maybe 2 weeks ago, they reached out and said, hey, do you mind if we include your research as part of our land management plan there, just talking about the historical significance of the area? And I was like, absolutely. I have a big belief that information wants to be free and should be free. So I was like, by all means, share it and include it, and so it's out there for future people to see and read and enjoy.
Yeah, I enjoyed too your going to see, was it a train building or a railroad building?
Oh, yeah.
Before it got demolished. I enjoyed that also. So I think that the things that you're doing, even though it's kind of like your side thing, I think it's really fun, and I enjoy seeing it from the internet.
Well, thanks. I appreciate it. It's a fun hobby, and I get a lot of enjoyment out of it, and people seem to get a lot of enjoyment out of it. So that makes it pretty rewarding and worthwhile.
Yeah. So, do you have a adventure that you would recommend to people if they wanted to just go out and try one? Or
yeah, sure. I've got I like them all for different reasons. Like a lot of people I get that kind of question, like, hey, what adventure would you recommend? And then they usually give me a little bit of background on who's all going, what age group, 3-year-old, 4-year-old, 10-year-old, 15-year-old. And if it's their first time and they're younger, I usually suggest the Peckway Trolley Trail. It starts at where the Mardic Forge, Hotel. Some of the old timers know where that used to be. It was a big biker bar back in the day. And you can walk along the Peckway all the way down to Colemanville, where they have a covered bridge. And there's a couple neat things to see, but it's the old tracks from a trolley. The trolley used to run from Millersville. It used to go all over the county, but it ran from basically the center of Lancaster to Millersville, and then you could catch another trolley from Millersville down to Peckway, and again, it kind of ties in with that Peckway Hannah Inn. Like, Peckway was like the place to visit until the Great Depression. Like, and people are like, what did they do there? I'm like, well, the same things they do today: swimming, boating, go visit the cave, fishing. But you would take that trolley down. There was a big hotel that was actually there, the Riverview. But anyway, you can hike along the Peckway Trolley Trail. There's lots of neat things to see. Someone else has a really cool geocache that I'm like, hey, you can kind of tack this on as a fun side adventure. And then at the end, at the about a mile and almost a mile and a half down, there's that covered bridge, and there's kind of a 2-for-1 deal there. So that's usually enough to get people's appetites really wet. But probably my favorite, and if they're a little bit older, is the we call the I'm calling the Tunnels of Nonola adventure. And so you start at Shanks Ferry and you walk. There's a couple ways to do it, but you can start on the Nonola rail trail there, and there are tunnels. They, when they built that 29-mile stretch of the Nonola low grade, there are as many as 80 tunnels and bridges to move stuff. The grade is amazing. Like, there's no more than a 1% increase or decrease the whole way. And so, I mean, I don't know if you could ever do it today, but they just, like, evaporated valleys, like just fill it in.
Probably not.
Yeah, it's probably not. Nope, there's a mountain there, no problem. We're just going to blast it open.
Right.
But anywhere where there was a stream, there is a tunnel, and we do a lot. I do a lot of the exploring in the winter when the brush is down. But they are beautiful, handmade Italian masonry, hand cut rock tunnels. These just giant bricks. They're like 3x3x6, most of them, and just these beautiful tunnels of various sizes. But the adventure basically takes people from Shanks Ferry almost down to Safe Harbor, and there are 4 tunnels, 5 if you count the Shanks Ferry tunnel you drive through to get there, that are various sizes and really neat. And so the adventure kind of takes you off the trail, down under the rail trail, through the tunnel, and you kind of get to explore these 4 tunnels. And I think it's neat, like, scores of people, possibly more in the summer, walk the rail trail every day, riding bikes, walking the dogs, jogging, running. But like, how many even knew of just these beautiful tunnels? Most of them are like 1905. Were just, hidden down there. So that adventure takes you, down the steep side and through the tunnel, and you get to do some creek stomping, and some of these tunnels are kind of dark, and you get to check all that out, and so that's, a lot of people have been having a lot of fun doing that, and there's some codes to decipher along the way to find the treasure.
Yeah, very, very cool. I think I want to get we'll have to take we have a Siberian Husky named Penelope. We'll have to take Penelope out and go on some adventures.
Yeah, you would like that Peckway trolley. I don't know if she likes water. There's a lot of water there to get
wet.
She's
not, she will let her paws get wet, but she is a princess.
Okay.
So what challenges or trends do you see in preservation, history, conservation? You can pick your topic.
Yeah. I think there's definitely some value, and it's a kind of a double-edged sword, and some people don't always approve, but I think there's definitely some value to letting people know that, hey, these things are here, and you can go and and see it if you want. I have another belief that I think people are inherently good.
Right.
I know some people get like, oh, they're always wrecking it up, and and I do a lot of hiking, and I find, like, I'll find a pair of sunglasses, and I'm thinking, I don't think this guy intentionally meant to.
No, they're probably wondering where they are.
Or they're in the winter I find a pair of single mitten on the ground, and I'm thinking, I doubt he meant to, like, intentionally just chuck this here. It probably fell, and now he's got a cold hand. But so I like drawing some attention to these things. I think when people know about them, there's definitely some value. Some people aren't always thrilled with that. They're like, well, it was better when no one knew about it. I'm like, yeah, I'm kind of torn. I'm kind of torn on that. There are definitely some places in Lancaster County where we could do that. I've been over to the York County side by Lock 12, and they have, by their Mill Creek there, they've got some stone ruins. And I think it's really amazing that you can just climb down in there and kind of explore through this. I mean, they have a chain link fence by the road, I think, just to keep cars or whatever, but there's it's right there on the Mason-Dixon line. There are no signs that say you can't be in there.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't say it's dangerous or anything, but it's just a neat thing, like, wow, this was here and this was here when they had the canal, and this is pretty neat. There's a similar area on the Peckway near the Colemanville where there used to be a big utility plant, but that's all, no trespassing. The power company owns it.
Right.
Just like they own all that land with the trail and stuff on it. So I just think I'm like, there's no reason it has to be that way. It would be neat if people could visit it, because it's covered in brush, and in the winter I can see it, through binoculars, or kind of standing in the water there. I can see that. And I think there's, again, some value if we can tell people these things are here, and sort of tell their story, and even allow them to go and visit.
Yeah, I agree. And I know I've heard that too with, I think that's a common internet complaint where, I hear people complaining about even Instagrammable places, that there's so many people who want to go get their pictures taken at a place that is famous on Instagram, and that that now there's so much traffic, and it's terrible. But I think that allowing people to realize that the history that was there, like, I had never realized all the history and even the lock system around Columbia. until I had gone on the Underground Railroad tour. So like, and I mean, I wasn't born here, but I've lived here since '89, and you know, I didn't know any of that history. So I think it's important to, and I took a local history class in high school, but I think it's really important to tell the history of the whole area, and let people know about it, because I think it's interesting to see things even if you only see remnants of it, because then you realize like how much like not industrial, but yeah, that it was like this was a booming area at one time, and now it's more rural or less built up.
Well, I just saw someone posted on my Facebook group, Uncharted Lancaster Facebook group. Someone thought, I don't know, like a year ago, they're like, do you have a Facebook group? I was like, I have a page. They're like, oh, you should have a group too. And so I made one, but people posting photos there. But I saw one of Shanks Ferry that predated the Safe Harbor Dam, and where they had like a coal dredging operation there. And like I'm there all the time, and I was like, oh my gosh, it's amazing. I think this photo was like from 1926. So, it's almost, 100 years old, and like how radically different that area looked. And I was just like, that's crazy that like, there's all these buildings and you can see this dredging operation. And I knew that they dredged coal out of the Susquehanna, but I just didn't realize that, that was sort of a port right there for on the Susquehanna there at Safe Harbor, which I thought was pretty neat.
Yeah, I agree. So how can someone, help support your efforts? I know you mentioned Water Week. Did you want to talk about that a little bit more?
Sure. Yeah. Support. So I've got a place on my website, but basically when you do the adventure, I've got I've got these boxes or in crates and things, and the treasure's in there, and I usually have a paper that says, hey, congratulations, you did it. It also because that's happened to me, I stumble onto something somewhere and I'm like, what is this thing? So I always have a note in there that says, hey, if you found this because you're an eagle-eyed observer, this is what's going on, congratulations. But then I said, Indiana Jones went all over the place there, but who's paying those airline tickets for it? It must have been Marcus Brody, and I need a Marcus Brody. So I have a little QR code, and they can donate a couple bucks on PayPal or Venmo if they had a good time, and people do. I get a couple dollars every week, and I just dump that right back into Amazon to buy more 3D filament and plastic gold coins and whatever. And I also have like a little, you can buy an Uncharted Lancaster t-shirt on Amazon if you want. And Amazon gets most of the money, but I don't have to do any work. They send me a couple bucks every time I sell them a shirt. So I was like, oh, okay, that's pretty cool. So I've sold some shirts. So, but yeah, so people are good like that. And, it's not quite there yet. It'd be nice if it just sort of was a self-sustaining operation, but, but I get a lot of enjoyment out of it. And so, and so that's just fine.
Yeah, very good. And is there anything that you thought about that you wanted to share that maybe we didn't talk about?
I was, you'd mentioned just like that local history class, and I think, I was thinking about that, and I think so many of us travel to distant places to see the history there that we're not always familiar with the history right where we live. Yeah. And I constantly, and people are like, oh, I'm sure I'll get emails and messages, and I'm like, well, I'm sure you know about this. And I'm like, oh, no, not really. I only know about these very narrow things that I've extensively researched for these adventures. But I'm like, no, tell me more. I'd like to read about that. And so, I think that's, I don't know, maybe it's an American thing. Like, I want to travel to this far place, which is great. I've traveled all over and seen a lot of neat things, but I think we often forget or are unaware of the neat history right in our backyards. Again, just like where I live here, I live in Conestoga, and that there was, this dynamite factory that exploded in 1906, and it just, vaporized 11 guys, and you could go find that spot. And so I'm like, wow, that's pretty crazy. And that, there are petroglyphs right out in the middle of the Susquehanna, just below Safe Harbor. And, and I've been out there to see those, and just these other, just neat things that I write about, and sometimes I've had it on the website a few times, and people are still like, wow, I just because Facebook doesn't show you everything.
Right. Yeah.
Like I didn't know that. That's amazing. And so so I always think that's neat when people can learn something new about the area, and then people tell me things like I'll say like, well, we went here, there was a stream, it went through this tunnel. I don't know what the stream's called. I can't find the name. And someone almost is like, well, that's such and such. I'm like, oh, perfect. Excellent. Thank you, internet. And I can, do that. So I always think we sort of take our local history for granted, and not to be negative. We're just, it's often in school, the focus of, World War II and, the greater American history part, for other places. So I like to kind of highlight the things right here.
Yeah, I agree. And I think too, like when you're home, when you're on vacation, it's one thing. You can go do the tours or whatever, but when you're home, you're living your regular everyday life. And so you don't necessarily like take time to look up and see what. So this is a great way to do that, especially, in the warmer months. Yeah. And I do know people go out in the cold too.
I don't mind it. There's less people, there's less brush for me. I'm just like, I can get out like a little bit off the trail and like, let me get down in there. And we spent a lot of this winter. I have a big chunk of rope, and I've done most of the Enola low grade now, but I like to go, and there's these giant power poles, and I can usually just kind of lash my rope to it, and we just sort of walk off, like go down the steep edge. And every time I hear water and we go down, my wife thinks I'm crazy. And I take some pictures of these tunnels, and my son and I, and we come back up. And on my website, like I keep just kind of categorize them with photos and where they are. And because in the summer, it would, short of a machete, I think it'd be impossible to get to some of that stuff. There's just so much, pickers and stuff.
Yes. Okay. Well, very good. How can someone contact you? The website, is there? Yeah,
there's a contact button on the website. I mean, I'm on social media, so I get a lot of messages, the Facebook messages and the Instagram messages, and they can, email me at adam@unchartedlancaster.com, of course. But yeah, there's a variety. It kind of drives me crazy. I got to figure out some way to get all those messages just to come to one spot, because I'm always like, someone's like, I messaged you. And I was like, oh, I guess I didn't check that one.
Oh, well, very good. I enjoyed our conversation. Thank you. Thank you for coming on with me today.
Well, thanks for inviting me, Danielle. I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Practical Preservation Podcast. The resources discussed during this episode are on our website at practicalpreservationservices.com/podcast. If you received value from this episode and know someone else that will get value from it as well, please share it with them. Join us next week for another episode of the Practical Preservation Podcast. For more information on restoring your historic home, visit practicalpreservationservices.com.